So I'm going to go ahead now and pass it over to Rachael Belz, our executive director here at Ohio Citizen Action. She's been here since 1996 and has led us through some really amazing campaigns, including our original effort to stop House Bill 6 last year. I'll pass it over to you, Rachael.
Thanks, Anastasia. And let me add my personal welcome to everyone for this briefing about our campaign to repeal House Bill 6. Thanks so much for your commitment to fighting what's been called the worst energy policy in the nation. Of course, we know from the FBI, it's also a corrupt policy that needed $61 million in bribes from First Energy just to get it passed. Ohio Citizen Action and the broader public knew from the beginning that House Bill 6 was a bad deal for consumers, for clean energy, for our climate, and for Ohio. We all fought like hell, and you might have been with us, and you knew that there were powerful dark money forces working against the public good. You could just tell while we were fighting it. There's so much going on, and today's briefing is especially timely. One caveat is that things have been evolving quickly on this bill and issue and everything surrounding it the entire time. So what we know today could change by tomorrow. That's why you need to keep up with what we're doing and what we find out and how you can act. Both chambers of the Ohio General Assembly, thanks to pressure from outraged voters like you, possibly you as well, convened this week to address the overwhelming call for a full and clean repeal of House Bill 6 before the November elections. That's the good news, and frankly, the surprising news. That doesn't always happen in an election year in which half of the Senate is running and the entire House of Representatives are running. A lot of times they take it off after the summer recess and don't come back till after elections. But more on that in a bit. We'll begin today's program with a briefing on the state of repeal efforts. We'll discuss ways you can personally take action and urge others to do the same. And then we'll have plenty of time to open up for your questions. And remember, as Anastasia guided us, to ask the questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of the Zoom screen, and that way we'll get to as many of them as we possibly can. I'm going to go through briefly a little bit of the timeline, the highlights, or really the lowlights of House Bill 6, because there really is just so much going on and that went on with this bill. Just to put it into some context. In organizing this briefing, the context helps us understand how we got here. The saga began last year, but we need to briefly go through the timeline to have a productive conversation about where we go from here. So I would encourage you to buckle your seatbelts because this is a really bumpy ride. It's all such a crazy story. It's like House of Cards plus Schoolhouse Rock with a healthy dose of The Sopranos thrown in. As many of you know, Ohio Citizen Action is the premier grassroots mobilizing and organizing team in the Midwest. We organize and mobilize people in person, by phone, and online, engaging our members and supporters in actions that protect public health, improve our environmental quality, and benefit consumers. Along with so many of our colleagues, we were one of the key grassroots groups fighting passage of HB6 last year, and we remain in the forefront of repeal efforts today. This campaign, given the circumstances of the pandemic, the divisive political environment, and the extensive coverage of the corruption associated with the bill, has grown into a diverse and broad-based effort, bringing new partners to the table and forging relationships with new allies. In essence, you could say that adversity brought us together. So many of us are working on the same side for different reasons. From the coal plant managers in Southern Ohio, who last year wondered while they were testifying against HB6 why their plants and school districts didn't warrant such grand attention as the bill, to Americans for Prosperity and the Ohio Conservative Energy Forum, who understand that it's really bad business to continue to pick winners and losers in what is supposed to be a competitive market here in Ohio. Renewables are saving money and making long-term investments everywhere except Ohio. So let's start with January 6, 2019. With the help of 24 Democrats, which is unheard of, Perry County Republican Larry Householder staged a dramatic return to political power capturing the Ohio House Speaker post on a 52-46 floor vote. Householder had held the Speaker's gavel from 2001 to 2004 and became the first Ohioan in roughly 6 decades to recapture the position. So the fact that the Democrats and the Republicans worked together was very strange in Ohio to start with. But he was also a controversial choice for Speaker. His last time in the role, during the early 2000s, he found himself under federal investigation for money laundering. He was only elected Speaker last year after a contentious fight when he narrowly defeated Representative Ryan Smith. Now we know, according to the FBI affidavit, that First Energy funneled millions of dollars to 21 candidates that were handpicked by Householder, who pledged to support his rise to power. All of these politicians supported Householder's speakership, and only one voted against the bailout. April 12th, 2019. As Speaker, Larry Householder holds a press conference to outline a sweeping energy bill, what becomes HB6. The legislation includes bailouts for 2 failing nuclear power plants operated by First Energy. After the amendment process, the bill got even worse as it was winding through the House in many long and contentious hearings. The committees heard from tens of thousands of voters during the bill debates. You might have been one of them, sending in a letter, making a phone call, even coming and testifying like some of us did. They rewarded this type of constituent involvement and grassroots pressure by including bailouts for 2 of the region's dirtiest coal-fired power plants, and also at the same time, gutting the state's successful renewable energy and our efficiency standards. So they literally threw in everything and the kitchen sink. May 29th, 2019. After many contentious subcommittee and committee hearings, by the way, many that were recorded and you could still go back and watch, the controversial bill wins quick passage in the House on a 53-43 vote. June 30th, 2019. Nothing actually happened that day. First Energy had a self-imposed deadline of June 30th for passage of HB6. It was very, very well publicized. The legislature did not meet their well-publicized scare tactic deadline, though, of June 30th. On July 17th, 2019, HB6 clears the Senate on a 19-12 vote. There were some hearings as well, as you might imagine. It was not nearly as contentious as in the House. July 23rd, 2019, the House agrees to Senate changes, and the final bill passes by only 1 vote. Governor Mike DeWine signed it into law the very same day. From August to October of 2019, Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts, a coalition of business, consumer, and environmental groups, opposed the new law and seeks to put it up for a referendum on ballot that November. Supporters of HB6 spent tens of millions of dollars on TV, digital, print ads. Some probably got to your house just like mine. You might have seen them on the news every night, every morning, just to get the bill passed and to oppose the referendum. They spent tens of millions, probably more than that, versus the $4 million spent by the opponents of the bill. October 2019. According to the affidavit, First Energy wired $38 million in funds to Generation Now. This money funded ads that falsely claimed the Chinese government would use your personal information if you signed the petition. It also paid for bribery, harassment, and even physical assault of people collecting signatures. We're going to pause for a poll. Because they did such a great job from First Energy to really make sure we all knew what HB6 is, we want to know, where in the light of this target misinformation campaign were you did you get your news about HB6 in 2019?
And we're going to give people about 10 more seconds to finish answering. Yeah, so this one also a lot of people getting it from emails from trusted groups as well as newspaper, either print or online. If you guys hit other, go ahead and drop where you saw that in the chat. It looks like some of you already are, so that's awesome. Thank you for that. And yeah, as we said, social media was kind of where we were seeing a lot of those ads in addition to those mailers that you saw on that slide.
Because they were facing such a fierce counter campaign that also included Generation Now using a tactic from First Energy's own legal playbook, they conflicted out every petition gathering firm they could, meaning just like First Energy does with lawyers, they would hire them and put them on retainer, not even using them, so the other side couldn't use them. With those kinds of tactics, Generation Now successfully stopped Ohioans against corporate bailouts from gathering enough signatures to qualify for the ballot to overturn HB6. On October 22nd, the law took effect. As we said before, it's a corporate bailout. It's a corporate corrupt bailout for dinosaur power plants that intentionally gut renewable energy programs and efficiency programs in the process. This is not just a nuclear bailout bill. This bill also saves 2 large coal plants from closing and supported First Energy keeping another one open after the bill passed. It was truly one of the dirtiest campaigns we've ever seen. There's so many of us that spent decades organizing or lobbying, working on these issues in Ohio. Just the dirtiest campaign we'd ever seen. Pushed an expensive, dirty energy bailout onto Ohio consumers. We're not surprised this particular bit of corporate welfare slid through by greasing palms. So fast forward to this year. You might have heard the news. July 21st, 2020, Speaker Larry Householder was arrested by the FBI due to charges of corruption, bribery, and racketeering. Also arrested were Householder advisor Jeffrey Longstreth, longtime State House lobbyist Neil Clark, former Ohio Republican Party Chairman Matthew Borges, and Juan Hespedes, co-founder of the Oxley Group, a Columbus-based consulting firm. All 5 were arrested July 21st, 2020. According to the media reports, the federal investigation was launched over a year ago, and it's still going on, but it eventually included, to get to that point, secretly taped conversations, bank statements, text messages, and other documents that show the scope of the complex conspiracy. As I said, the FBI investigation is ongoing. So this week, September 1st, 2020, just on Tuesday, 2 days ago, this week, Representative Householder even had the audacity to show up to work at the State House, just business as usual. Except he was also maskless, continuing to show no regard for his colleagues or the people of Ohio. He wore a mask when he got arrested by the FBI at his house, and yet not while claiming to serve his constituents at the State House. He says he's not going anywhere and that he's not guilty of bribery scheme charges. Also at the State House on Tuesday, Speaker Bob Cupp announced the formation of a new Energy and Policy Oversight Committee. They're supposed to begin discussing next steps with HB6 starting next week. But he's still not demonstrating leadership in repealing the legislation. Rather, he's just choosing to kick the can down the road. We don't need another layer of bureaucracy. We need the House to right this wrong and just repeal the bill. The Senate introduced a repeal bill this week, SB 346, and held sponsor testimony only on the bill on Tuesday as well. At this point, Ohio Citizen Action and so many of our colleagues, we're not encouraging people to sign on to a particular bill yet. We are urging for a full and clean repeal of HB6 before Election Day with no excuses. There just isn't enough trust in the actions of our legislators for us to consider supporting a bill that could just easily get altered quite yet. And that's true for the public. That's also true for the legislators themselves. There's just not a lot of trust down there in Columbus. Ohio taxpayers should not be saddled with $1.5 billion in corrupt policy and years of higher electric bills and pollution that come with it. Bribery and greed must not be rewarded. HB6 was a bad idea then, and it's a bad idea now. So we're going to stop for a poll for a second. Our representatives need to step up and repeal this bill ASAP. How much does your legislators' vote on HB6 and their position on repeal factor into whether or not you vote for them this November?
Okay, so for most people, it is very important. A couple people, it's not that big a deal. But yeah, this for a lot of people is definitely one of the top issues, it looks like.
All right, great. I'm glad you're here. It's exactly what we need. So let's start talking about what you can do to help repeal House Bill 6. Government accountability is a big part of our mission at Ohio Citizen Action. We always put legislation through what we call the smell test, and HB6 really stank all the way through. First, it was initially sold as a clean air bill, but it was eventually bailing out also 2 coal plants built before the Clean Air Act, one of which is in Indiana, in addition to 2 outdated nuclear plants that are well past their prime. Secondly, House Holder initially predicted the bill would pass in mere weeks. Literally, the skids were just greased from the start. But eventually, organized opposition from Ohio Citizen Action, our members like you, our colleagues all throughout the state, all were so great it passed by just 1 vote. $61 million of bribery and racketeering, and we still lost by only 1 vote. And Larry Householder voted on that bill. Lastly, when the referendum effort to repeal the law gained momentum, it was killed by a combination of false, inflammatory, and bigoted mail and ads, aggressive petition blockers, and an unfairly short time to gather signatures. So there was no step, no part of this that was fairly a fair treatment for the public of what we will all have to pay for years. So here are some of the steps you can take. And if you're like me, you know some things about digital media, you're still learning more. There's a lot of things you can do in organizing on digital media, phones, letters that are repetitive, that get others involved, that make sure other people see that. So I want to remind people that that's really, really important. Don't just, do one thing. If you can do multiple things and get others involved, that's what we're looking for. First, contact your elected officials early and often. Really, right now, phone calls are the most effective and timely. This is a big part of why they came back in the first place. I was talking to a reporter just a few weeks ago who works on these issues all the time and mentioned that we needed them to come back before Election Day. He laughed because that's not typical in Ohio. In an election year, they usually take off after the summer recess and just don't come back until after the election. If you text your zip code to 520-200-2223, you can receive contact information for your 2 federal senators, your federal representative, your state senator, and your state representative. If you copy the information into the address book of your phone in the future, and you can use it frequently and often. Encourage others to call regularly as well. Tell them you want a clean, full repeal of HB6 before Election Day. Remind them that you're a registered voter, and please help hold them accountable. Letters to the editor are still one of the most read parts of the newspaper, and it's a great way to raise the profile of our issue. It's also a way to communicate indirectly with decision makers and inspire and activate others who share our position. The shorter the letter, the better. Most newspapers still limit letters to about 200 to 250 words. If possible, if you reference a recent article or another letter from the paper, it always increases the chances your letter will be printed. As you write your letter, imagine running into a friend on the street. What would you say to them? Maybe what did you say to them last year while this was happening? What action would you ask them to take, especially now that we have a chance to repeal it? Don't just target the large outlets. The local papers are really also starved for good content. If your letter is printed, we'd love to know, and we'd love to make sure to get it out there. You can sign up for our action list on the Ohio Citizen Action homepage, get the latest updates and opportunities for action, including the Equity Teletown Hall we're holding with some of our partners in the Power Clean Future Ohio campaign on September 22nd. That will focus on utility issues in Northeast Ohio. We're holding a car rally at the State House on Saturday, September 26th. And then by being part of our action list, you'll also get something I need all the time, fresh message points that help share on social media and in letters to the editor. So social media can sometimes get a bad rap. And don't forget, in the pandemic era, it's kind of changing how we think about all of this. So it can be your friend in organizing when it's supported by real action. And really, and I'm learning this every day working with our communications friends, repetition is key. First, if you follow, retweet, share Ohio Citizen Action and Ohio Consumer Power Alliance posts. Ohio Consumer Power Alliance is the project that our sister organization started last year to help defeat House Bill 6. You can comment on any of the posts. You can help keep the conversation going. We are also running some paid media ads. You probably see in Facebook, for instance. That's a great way to keep the conversation going. When you're on Twitter, retweeting is important, but so is putting messages in your own words. If you share what motivates you, that's the best way to encourage the actions of others that you know. For all the latest, you can join our Ohio Citizen Action Repeal House Bill 6 Facebook group. It's private, and help recruit others to do the same. That way, it's a great safe space for us to strategize and work together. It will come up in a routine HB6 repeal search on Facebook. Speaking of Facebook, you know, I know a lot of us are, you know, on there maybe or don't want to be on there that much, but here's the thing. It really is still utilized by so many Ohio legislators that it almost serves as kind of an open town hall, especially during the pandemic times here. So if you go directly to the representatives or senators' Facebook, Twitter, and other pages, you can engage them sometimes, but you can definitely engage constituents, post articles, help answer questions even sometimes. There's a really great organic back and forth going on from what we've seen already on this, and we want to make sure to amplify that. Because if you're like me, you have a lot of opinions about House Bill 6. You can refer people frequently to websites that they can get information and take action, like sending emails and sharing memes. There's our main website, always good, ohiocitizen.org. Then we have 2 websites set up for this and a similar effort, repealhb6.com and then samrandazzo.com. Obviously, we've been talking about House Bill 6, so you know why we have that. You can go to the repealhb6.com website and send your own letter. It's very easy to do. We even get you kind of started. Sam Randazzo is the chair of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. He is also the chair of the Ohio Power Siting Board. He is a known enemy of renewable energy and energy efficiency. I shouldn't say enemy, he does not like them. He does not like them at all. And he's in a very powerful position appointed by Governor DeWine to be able to help things like House Bill 6 happen or stop solar and wind projects. So if you can also go to samrandazzo.com, you can learn a little bit about him, and we encourage him to step down or be replaced. Also be sure to use the latest hashtags. Right now we're using hashtag repealhb6 and hashtag #RipItOut. The Rip It Out is a reference from a week ago. If you have it, you should see a short video of Senate President Larry Obhoff, who was confronted by a reporter on camera and was talking about how basically dirty and corrupt this bill is, and that if that's what happened, then they should rip it out. So we've been using that. We love that. We totally agree with Mr. Obhoff. We'd love you also to become an Ohio Citizen Ohio Citizen Action member. When we get your support, we put it to use immediately. What we need to do is have a bigger capacity, larger amount of grassroots working together on this. This is part of what's difficult in Ohio because it's such a big state, so much territory to cover. We're going to pause for a poll. It'll be, I think, our last poll. We would love to know what your first action step you think you'll take to repeal House Bill 6, and you can pick more than one.
Give people a few more seconds to finish up getting their answers in. See, I got a lot of people ready to call their elected officials, which is awesome. Ooh, and then joining the Repeal House Bill 6 Facebook page. We'll definitely drop that link into the chat for you in a moment. Awesome. Thank you all.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you. So let's get to the questions. Remember to type your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them as many as we can. So we'll kick off with the first one. I remember hearing last year that HB6 saves customers money. Is that true? That is one of the most important fallacies for us to look at. Here's why. Every part of House Bill 6 is just a pack of lies. It was from the very minute that the group got together, literally the householder group, I think they were called at one point, got together to think about this and how to get this through and how to get First Energy basically what they wanted. They were going to always figure out how to make it look like it either didn't cost customers money or that it actually saved them money ideally. So they used fuzzy math. What they basically did is they counted some things, they didn't count other things. Like for instance, on energy efficiency, because it got rid of, because it just gutted these standards, it took out some of the costs, these costs of energy efficiency, but it left in the savings of energy efficiency. So that way, it could help look like they were saving money when they really weren't. And there's, you might have seen the chart. So there's a new chart that our friends with Ohio Environmental Council, I know Environmental Law and Policy Center, and others helped work on this chart. And it shows that instead of saving you money, it's actually going to cost you about $7 more per month. And why that is important to know, yes, $7 is not, in the grand scheme of things, a ton of money, right? You can't probably even barely get lunch out for $7. But what we know is that, first of all, it's our money. It's not First Energy's money. And all of the utilities have been coming for their customers' money more and more. All of the utilities, not just the electric utilities, but that's part of it. Just a few years ago, we worked on a campaign against all of these different utilities for their fixed rate charges. They wanted to increase, sometimes double or triple, the amount you pay to even have the service in the first place of electric. And we organized, against AEP's proposal, against First Energy's proposals and others. And you would not believe how many people came out for all the reasons you'd think of. Nobody wants to pay more for the same service. So the cost chart is one thing we're really trying to get out there. And the other thing is that no matter what, this bill, as this sort of Frankenstein bill that it became something that would really, if you were going to do anything right with energy policy at all in Ohio, you should take some time. This thing did not take any time. And that's why they could show that it, again, erroneously, would save people money. They knew from us that it was a problem. It's the same reason they called this thing the Clean Air Act or the Clean Air whatever. And Sam Randazzo just last week approved at the Public Utilities Commission the Clean Air Fund to make sure that they had the money to pay for HB6, even though all this controversy is going on. So it's another reason why I don't like Sam Randazzo. All right, let's get to the questions. What are the chances that the Icebreaker Wind Project on Lake Erie will be revisited if HB6 is repealed? Well, the good news is there are chances that it will be revisited, even if it's not repealed. That is actually, there's a whole thing going on right now with that, with the Ohio Power Siting Board. Also, Sam Randazzo chaired. And just last week, they were supposed to have on the agenda, at the request of Senator Sandra Williams, and I believe it's 29 other 30 senators and representatives from the area, legislators in the area, who want the siting board to reconsider. Because what happened is the Icebreaker wind farm, offshore wind farm proposed for the Cleveland, Lake Erie area, was basically thwarted. It was approved a few months ago, but with what they call a poison pill, which basically means that there was an amendment thrown at the last minute into it that not even everybody voting on it seems to know or understand, that made it so that they couldn't operate the wind farm for a huge chunk, I think 5 months of the year, because of some migratory bird issues. Now, this thing, I believe I heard that the Icebreaker project had been researched, and people have been working on it for, I think, 16 years or something like that. So that's really ridiculous. That somehow Sam Randazzo, in his last minute attempt to save birds, would be more knowledgeable than, say, Audubon Society. So it's really ridiculous. I think, though, HB6 and all the controversy is kind of helping the Icebreaker and the Sam Randazzo situation, because it's really bringing to light how unbalanced the scales really are. So that's how I would look at it. But that's also why you should go to samrandazzo.com and check out what you can do to write to the Ohio Power Siting Board. We really believe it should be approved with the original plan and conditions and all of that in place. Okay, I heard jobs will be lost in Ohio with HB6. What jobs are those? So with HB6, there are two parts to this. One is last year, when the bill was being, working its way through the Senate and the House and being lobbied and everything, there's a lot of pressure from labor within parts of the state in particular, especially the First Energy Territory, about the jobs of the nuclear power plant. That is something that had been threatened. They threatened to close these plants numerous times over the years. They also devalued these plants and their coal plants, as I think did most of the utilities, so that they wouldn't have to pay so much in taxes, which also hurts the schools in the area. So there's a lot of things that have happened that actually don't have anything to do with HB6 that don't help jobs. But what also happens is when you pit one against the other, so in this case, helping nuclear and then just some coal plant, not even all the coal plants, like, a couple coal plants, these nuclear plants, a little bit of solar. It's like you really are picking winners and losers. And that's why the oil and gas people were against it. I mean, I can't imagine anything else. I'd be on the same side of oil and gas, not working together, but same side of the issue of, and that's because it was this big winners and losers, with First Energy just throwing their weight around. So one of the things I think that's really important is that people have got to start considering is the just transition of workers. No matter what happens with HB6 or anything, there is a point in which all of these old coal plants and all of these old nuclear plants in Ohio will be closed. They're just too old. They're basically too old now. And then they've not been well maintained, especially the Davis-Besse nuclear plant by First Energy. But if you don't ever talk about the fact that it's going to close, just like if you never talk about, your car hitting the end of its life, what are you going to do, or help your child do that? You don't have a plan, and so that's not fair to the workers, and that's not fair to the communities. What we also think is really important is to use the expertise that school boards and labor unions and organizers of groups like ours, but in New York, for instance, were able to put together in this exact same situation. We are not in this by ourselves. This is not something that's specific to Ohio, but we've never addressed the issue. So then when the jobs issue comes up, you're literally pitting, like I said earlier, literally two, I couldn't believe it, two coal plant managers from Southern Ohio about these big, pretty nasty coal plants, but they're talking about like, nobody's ever done anything to help our coal plants, and we're bigger and produce more than these other plants, kind of what's the deal? And that was just, I mean, honestly, it was a little heartbreaking. It just makes you see how greedy and how complex all of this is. So the other thing you should know, though, which I think is very interesting, just to wrap up this jobs thing, is that there are senators like Senator Teresa Gavarone, for instance, up in the Toledo, Bowling Greenish area, who have some of these nuclear jobs in her district, but who also have something like 8,000 first solar jobs in their district. And that, I think it's maybe 3 or 4 times as many nuclear jobs, maybe more than that. And, you don't hear that. So it's like, at some point, the jobs issue has got to be addressed, I think, a more holistic way than First Energy deciding which jobs are the most important. Okay, any insight into what triggered the FBI's investigation? That's a good one. I don't know what triggered it. I didn't know it was going on. I was very pleasantly surprised with, I think, most of the public to find this out. And I'm kind of glad, because we were able to focus on what comes next, which we're also working on concurrently. But now we also have the opportunity to, possibly work to, we can repeal this. We can repeal this. That's the thing. I say possibly only because, the trust issue we talked about in Columbus. But what I think triggered part of it were the bribes. So there were bribes all through this thing. Well, where I think probably it got sloppy enough that it caught a lot more attention, it seemed, was when there was bribing of the petitioners. We heard of various people. I think I've heard anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500, and a plane ticket anywhere in the continental United States to turn in your petition signatures to them and leave. To one of the gentlemen that was approached by his mentor, Tyler Furman was, and this has been reported in the news and such, was approached by his mentor, and he ran the petition. He was one of the people who ran the petition effort, the repeal, House Bill 6, on the good side, our side, and he was offered a bribe that he did not take, and then worked also with FBI, and I don't know there's others as well. So, what we've seen for a long time is that First Energy in particular just always overreaches, uses their clout, uses their power, gets what they need, give them an inch, take a mile, they just overreach. And that's, I think, what happened in this case as well. And when you have that many people involved in such a messy, dirty, and you have that much money, I guess, I mean, I don't know. It's so far outside my realm of understanding that somebody could do that and then actually still show up for work this week like no big deal. I don't understand that at all. How can we get rid of legal dark money influence in Ohio? Oh, well, that's a tough one. It's not just Ohio. I mean, that's why I'm kind of pausing, because that one is true that it's really across the country. With Citizens United, it's gotten so much worse. The decision from 2010, and that's basically what allowed even more dark money. I mean, there was that before, but it was kind of like, it wasn't just this unlimited, buffet of greed. And so I think probably something needs to happen with Citizens United. I know at the state level, we need to have campaign finance reform and we need all kinds of measures. I think even when it comes to things like gerrymandering and who gets to, sit in these seats, there's all kinds of things that are happening or are about to happen or will be taking place soon from things we voted on recently. So I think all of these are really important. But unfortunately, I think this one, Ohio, is just not alone. One thing, though, I will say is we have to talk about what happened here and the things you're learning tonight and what else you can find out and how we can help repeal this, because no matter what happens next in Ohio, one of the great fears so many of us have had, and even, talking to reporters, you can see this happening, is that this will spread to other states. Not only the House Bill 6 type of thing, but possibly even worse than that. would be all the attacks on the petitioners and the whole referendum bribery scheme, and to be able to stop somebody from putting something on the ballot in Ohio. And from what I understand, the people against House Bill 6 on the petitioning side had the money to be able to do it. It wasn't that. It's not an area we work in ourselves too much, but that is just, you literally can't beat, that much bribery and money. So we have to bring it to light so that it doesn't happen elsewhere, or so that if it's starting to happen, people know who to contact, that we can help give them some information to fight. There's definitely some things we learned during this whole fight. Yeah, so I'll leave that there. I know there's another one coming. Is Ohio Citizen Action and its allies working to get the word out about the racial intersectionality of this issue? Yes, one of the things that, every part of this is so messed up with this bill and the process and every bit of it, but it fits perfectly in to the white dominant culture that we find ourselves in here in Ohio and elsewhere. So at Ohio Citizen Action and within a number of coalitions within Ohio that we work with, there are opportunities for us to do work in the equity, with an equity lens, to be able to, I think, help our issues and our organization. So our own internal processes, our hiring, our processes, all of the things, as well as the external campaigns and the work that we do. We work really closely with a lot of groups on, for instance, the Power Clean Future Ohio campaign, which you should check that out if you get a chance. That's bringing together cities across the state, communities, to do all kinds of things, but to equitably reduce carbon in our communities in all kinds of ways. So even within that structure, we're working with groups. We're pulling together equity coach opportunities. We're pulling together all kinds of conversations about trainings. And I'm really lucky that I get to be one of the people in the mix with this, with Ohio Citizen Action. So there's a lot of wonderful BIPOC organizers in particular across the state that are just stepping up and showing us all so much more of what we need to do to help truly make all of the issues more intersectional, at the same time as we do the best we can to bring along our own organizations. It's been an effort for the past few years, and even within the Midwest, there's a REAMP network that does a lot of great work on equity and equitable deep decarbonization for the last few years. There's just great opportunities here in Ohio and throughout the Midwest to broaden your horizons and figure out how to make sure all of your members understand how important the intersectionality is, because it really is. It's all part and parcel of the same problems. There's another question. Will you keep us posted on replacement legislation? Do you think it will be developed in committee? Yes, we will absolutely keep you up on replacement legislation. There's, there were kind of a flurry of bills introduced in August in the House and the Senate at first. Some folks put their names on them. Some folks didn't want to put their names on it because who else is on it and might, change the bill. So honestly, there just really isn't any trust at the legislature, I think, even among each other of the legislators. So it's hard to tell what's going to happen next. But what I can tell you for sure is that public pressure has made all the difference, because they were not going to come back until after the election. Even just a few weeks ago, I was talking to a reporter. I think it was about 3 weeks ago. I was talking to a reporter about why they have to come back before why we need them to come back before the election. And he kind of laughed at me because it's not really that common. They do just take off. So the reason they're coming back is because of the outpouring and the outcry from all of the people, just like all of you, letting them know this is not right. Also, obviously, the news articles, the social media, everything that they're hearing, seeing. Former Speaker Larry Householder showing up at the State House on Tuesday is interesting for many reasons. But one of the reasons is that it's very hard to distance yourself from the corruption and that whole mess if you are hanging out with in the State House and your job with the corruptor in chief. So that's a real problem. the reason they're coming back is because of all of us. We need to keep up the drumbeat, and we need it to be louder. I don't know if it'll be developed in committee, to be honest with you. There's a lot of things. The other thing is the Senate's moving a little faster than the House. A lot of people see this as this was kind of the House's mess, and true to form it was. And honestly, if I was a senator, I would be looking to fix it so I don't have anything to do with it, you know, so that I can stay away from the stink, if you will. So it will be interesting to see. I will say we definitely want to watch the committees for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which last year's committee hearings were very controversial. I know a bunch of them were recorded. It might be different. They might all be recorded now of the pandemic, but there were times that committee chairs and subcommittee chairs were verbally attacking people testifying and whatnot. So there's all kinds of things that, you know, could happen. Okay, so another one. How were they able to legally get all Ohioans to pay for a bailout that only serves some Ohioans? Like, for instance, First Energy. Well, that was kind of tricky because in fact, Sam Randazzo, you might remember from samrandazzo.com, who we'd love to see out of his job, he just brought up last week, and they passed the sort of legal piece of creating this clean air fund, which we know is not a clean air fund, at the Public Utilities Commission. So they just did this last week, even though there's all this controversy over the bill itself. And how they were able to do it is that they basically convinced, they got Sam Randazzo in the Public Utilities chair. So he came into that chair August of 2019. He was a former lobbyist with the industrial energy users. So other side of renewables and energy efficiency, does not like those at all. Very pro First Energy. They had Governor DeWine, First Energy put, you know, a lot of money into his campaign. And then you've got Speaker Householder. So even though it creates a whole new fund and it creates this whole new process, as the questioner pointed out, not just a First Energy territory process, for instance, that's part of what they felt they needed to do to get this thing passed. Because honestly, they would not have had enough money if they just got it from First Energy customers. And if they just got it from First Energy customers and got the $1.5 billion that they asked for, which, by the way, we have no information or backup as to if they really need that money. There's nothing saying they really need that money. They did a stock buyback after they got the bailout approved. So that doesn't tell me that they need the money. It tells me their shareholders wanted the money. So they took the extra step of basically sticking it to all Ohioans, and they made it a non-bypassable charge, which means that everybody who is in the First Energy, AEP, Duke, or Dayton Power and Light service territories, which is almost all Ohioans, will have to pay this if it remains law. The only people that wouldn't fall under this are municipal cities that are under, for instance, American Municipal Power, or rural co-ops. They're not through the Public Utilities Commission. So there's, you know, not that many folks, but there are a few folks. So it really does, it would apply to absolutely, practically everybody. I mean, not absolutely, practically. When will there be a vote on HB6 and how often should we call? That's a good question. It's partly why I had the caveat in the beginning. A lot of people were saying, oh, this is going to take so long. You know, they're going to, again, not come back until election, after election. Now they're coming back. I don't know when a vote, we don't know when a vote will happen. That's also why I think it's important to call early, but also often, and contact them in a bunch of different ways. There's no reason you can't contact any of them. There's no reason that you can't contact all of these new House members, for instance, on this committee, and go to their social media pages. So I would say watch, especially this month. They're not going to want to get close at all to their election date, which of course we know is November 3rd. And nobody really knows how to campaign in this pandemic. So that's the other thing, is that it's not, you can't call it a typical election year either. So I would say we got to watch it right now. It's partly why we're doing this briefing today 2 times, because it's so important to watch right now what's going on. and House and Senate. I mean, we don't know which way it's going to go. What would you put in an elevator speech on HB6? Oh, this questioner does not know me. I'm not very good at elevator speeches. You might know that from me talking for a half an hour very easily. I think when I think about this, I think about talking to my neighbors. My neighbors near me are, they're not in this work. But they're very smart people doing other things, right? So when we've talked about it and we talk about what we do, because they learned last year what I do, I talk about House Bill 6, and I usually bring up the fact that it's really the biggest corruption scandal in Ohio history. It was a very desperate attempt by First Energy to steal $1.5 billion from their customers and electric customers all through the state. And they lied and they bribed and they created situations in which they kind of held Ohioans hostage, really, on this. That's what that whole June 30th date was about. So I think I would and then I would probably ask them, since I know they've lived here as long as I have for a little longer, I would ask them, do you remember getting this in the mail last year? Do you remember seeing those ads last year, if you're an Ohioan? Because almost everybody does. Those xenophobic ads, don't give your don't sign the petition, it'll give it to the Chinese, or all of those things. So even if they don't quite know what I'm talking about, basically as soon as I remind people the things that came into their home through the mail, through the evening news, TV ads, all that, they usually do. So by then the conversation kind of goes from there, because their eyes get big and they ask the question and then you go from there. So again, I'm not great at elevator speeches, but I think that hitting the corruption and this is not something necessary. We do not need this. We do not need to bail any of these plants out. So I think I would hit something along those lines. Can people outside Ohio contact lawmakers about HB6? Absolutely, absolutely. I would say you can contact them in any way you like. The greatest reach that you will have to help us continue to spread this is probably through social media and telling others. The reason why I think you want to pay attention outside of Ohio, and maybe why you have been paying attention outside of Ohio, and a quick shout out to our friends in our Hudson Bay Company Network, because I know you pay attention to these things all the time. I think the reason you might want to pay attention is because this could come to your state. Whether it's this bill, this type of bill, maybe, maybe not, but you don't want any of it, but you definitely don't want what happened also with the referendum and the political attacks and the, surrounding the petitioners and all of that. I could see that kind of scare tactic working really well elsewhere in the future. And that was one of the things I think that scared us the most. We couldn't stop what was happening in Ohio. We were trying to, but the idea that, through ALEC and so many other different trade associations, if you will, they hear about all these different ways that you can, stop people like us. And I know, and I don't have the information in front of me, but I know that First Energy won an advertising campaign, or is actually Generation Now won an advertising campaign last year for this. And I know that there were presentations, PowerPoints and things that showed other elected officials in other states and other companies, I think it was other companies actually, how to do this. So you do not want this. This is bad enough that this has happened here in Ohio and all the corruption and all the, everything. You definitely don't want this in your state. So I think that watching it from afar and letting people know is important. Also, we've gotten a lot of attention, as Ohio has for a number of years, on our issues because we are a semi-deregulated state. We have some amount of regulation, hence the Public Utilities Commission. But we were deregulated 20 years ago, so we are a little different than some states. So this bill is a little different based upon Ohio, but I think the impetus of the cash grab is important. The other thing you should know is that both this situation of bailing out nuclear plants and also some of the corruption happened in Illinois. And that's all starting to come out now too, around the same time. Their bill passed at least a year before ours, might be two, I can't remember. But there are other scandals around about nuclear power. And I'm gonna say one more quick thing about nuclear power, just because somebody may ask this or might be thinking this. I know there's a big difference of opinion within even the environmental or progressive communities about nuclear power. Ohio Citizen Action has always been against these plants in particular. And we do not believe that nuclear power is, emission free. It might not have carbon emissions, but it has a whole lot of other pollution and risks involved as well. From the spent fuel rods that are still just buried on site. So that makes it even riskier for those who work or live right next to the plants. These two plants are not new. These are old plants that First Energy has basically run into the ground. So even folks in our own environmental community who watch some of the advancements on nuclear and whatnot, in the world, there's no conversation to be had here about that, and there shouldn't be, because that's not what we're talking about. These are old plants that should close and have been threatened by First Energy to close for years. One of them, the Davis-Besse plant, even had a football-sized hole in the reactor lid in 2003, I believe it was. And that was around the time that it got one of the first bailouts. When they deregulated the electric market here in Ohio 20 years ago, some of these plants, like those nuclear plants, already got bailed out. Billions of dollars. We fought it then. So I think it's important to point out that while nuclear power shares a different spot for some of us, here at Ohio Citizen Action, we just do not believe that from the environmental, public health, or frankly, the consumer perspective, these are plants that we need or should continue running. So we don't believe they need bailouts. We don't believe that they should remain open. And First Energy's done nothing to show us differently. In fact, if anything, as nonprofit organizations, when we do grants, we actually have to jump through more hoops and have more deliverables and reports for the grants that we get, which I can tell you are not 1.5 billion, than First Energy had to do with the legislature approving that. And that just is shocking to me. It's bad enough that they got approved for the money with almost no, strings attached. Okay, another question. Does having a deregulated utility help or hinder efforts to develop more renewable energy? Oh, that's a good question. Kind of depends on the day for that one. I would say that I'll just speak to Ohio, because I know that deregulation in other states, this may or may not be the case. And I definitely am barely an expert in Ohio. I don't think I could pretend to do this for any other state. But in Ohio, it gave us customer choice, because we included the community choice aggregation piece of it. So it's enabled communities to create, if they pass it locally, buying groups, which in some cases, like Cincinnati, we were able to invest in renewable energy credits, and also then work to very soon support solar plants in like Highland County nearby in Southwest Ohio, so that we are actually, through our city aggregation contract, supporting renewable energy, steel in the ground right here. That wasn't possible when we passed this originally in 2011, aggregation for Cincinnati, but it is much more possible now. And Columbus has aggregation on the ballot for November. So that's an opportunity to have the third largest aggregator in the whole country. And I think the first in the Midwest. So that would be a large buying group. Having these buying groups can help promote energy efficiency and renewable energy. There have also been times that, because the Public Utilities Chair, Sam Randazzo, is also the chair of the Ohio Power Siting Board, that it has hindered, and I don't think this is necessarily because of deregulation, but it's hard to tell because we've been in this system for 20 years. He's been able to practically single-handedly stop the Icebreaker offshore wind farm up in the Cleveland area, which 30 legislators, including Senator Sandra Williams, have asked to reconsider that decision in September. This happened, I believe it was in either late May or June. And while it was approved with what they call a poison pill, meaning there was basically an amendment thrown at the last minute that makes it practically impossible to build, and definitely impossible to build in the way it had been laid out for more than a decade. So it's hard to tell. I don't think it helps. I don't know that it hurts. I will say that there are large debates about utility scale solar, for instance, or utility scale wind. I'm of the opinion that we need a whole lot more renewable energy and energy efficiency, certainly in our state, let alone this country and the world. So I think there are ways, if we're all looking in the same direction, I feel like there are ways that we can work together. I'd love to be able to continue at times to work with utilities on supporting renewable projects. It's been a rarity, but we have been able to do it. And when we can be on the same side of something important like that, I think that shows there's a change in Ohio. Somebody asked, I hear replacement bills have been submitted. Is this correct? How do we identify them? There have been replacement bills submitted. There's a lot of different, I don't know how many right now. There's a whole bunch of them. I know there are different groups that will be tracking this. I think we'll probably figure out a way I'm definitely not the person to do this, but I bet the folks who are on this to track this and have this on our website so you can see it. Again, we're not supporting any of these bills because none of them are so far a clean repeal that we believe would remain a clean repeal. We do not believe at Ohio Citizen Action, and there's so many folks within our coalition and against House Bill 6, that we do not believe it needs to be replaced right now. What we know is that part of the problem and how we keep getting ourselves into this situation where the utilities come to the legislature and the PUCO back and forth for money is because we do not have a comprehensive energy policy in Ohio. And that's a problem because without that, it's like not having a strategic plan for your business. You know, most businesses can't grow without a strategic plan in place that everybody's working together towards as a vision. And in Ohio, because we don't have that, we constantly have utilities like First Energy throwing their weight around at the commission and at the legislature. So if we're going to have any kind of a replacement, we need big things to happen in Ohio. We shouldn't be going back and forth about these ridiculous past dinosaur plants. We should be talking about renewables in the future. We should be talking about energy efficiency and what we can do. We should be talking about transitioning jobs. We know these plants, these coal and nuclear plants, no matter what happens with HB6, are not going to stay open forever. Most of them should already be closed just by their age. So if you're really concerned about workers at these plants like we are, what you really want to do is start having conversations about how to transition people. What comes next? And states and communities who have done this are way ahead of the game. And we're just so far behind in Ohio. So why would we be talking about replacing something when we do not even have a strategic plan whatsoever? We believe that needs to come next, but it should not be slammed through like HB6 and so many horrible things have been the last few years in our legislature. Question, what's the status of the Ohio Consumers Council? Is there still one? And are they involved in this? The Ohio Consumers Council is a state-funded, kind of a quasi-governmental entity. So it's not like Ohio Citizen Action where we're grassroots and separate and don't get any state funding and all that, but it's not completely a state office. I know that sounds weird. It's kind of a strange situation. But the important thing is to remember where their budget comes from, which is the state's budget, which means that there can be lots of pressure on the Consumers Council to act in a certain way or not weigh in or try to stop their efforts. I will tell you that Sam Randazzo at the Public Utilities Commission doesn't seem to be a fan of the Consumers Council. The Consumers Council is sometimes on the same side as Ohio Citizen Action. We don't work together particularly, but like on the fixed rate charges, we were on the same side. I don't know where they're at on these bills. My guess is they're probably watching them. And the question about is there still one, I can tell you there's always forces working to get rid of the Consumers Council in the state. So I think that's something that needs to be watched. What's also important to know, though, is even in their best moments, the Consumers Council, especially in the last handful of years, is really not the place where residential consumers, like customers like we're talking about here, are going to have as much involvement. That's partly why we created the Project Ohio Consumers Power Alliance, because we knew that the consumer issues, whether you're an environmentalist or not, whether you have a huge amount of work you do on public health, almost everybody pays a utility bill. And nobody wants to pay more for basically just the same service. So it's really important for us to, as consumers, stick together and say enough is enough. Stop taking out of our pockets, basically. Let me give you just a little bit more reminder here. As we've talked a lot about, calling, emailing your legislators, encouraging others to do so as well. It's so critical in this era. We can't door knock. We can't be knocking on doors and talking with people in the communities right now. As you probably are aware, we haven't since March 12th. So this is, we're finding every kind of way, all the different groups within our coalition are as well, to make sure that we can help people get as involved as possible. As I said earlier, you can follow Ohio Citizen Action via Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can share hashtag Repeal HB6 content through all of those channels. I want to thank you again. I want to thank the audience for participating. Great questions, sticking with us. I really want to thank all the Ohio Citizen Action staff. We've got a great team. They've all helped put this work together for this briefing. And I love to be able to do these kinds of things because the fights are so critical and they're so complex, and it takes so many of us that being able to bring all of you with us is going to make the big difference on repealing. What I want to also tell you is that everything that you can do when it comes to this issue makes a difference. This is part of the climate movement. You hear about climate, you hear about movement politics. We don't always think about all of the things that we're doing here and how it plays in, but it really does. And what we're building is political power through real people just like you. So thank you very much for joining with us. And again, really looking forward to your help in doing the, in repealing House Bill 6. Really, that's really the most important thing. Remember that we have the teletown hall on September 22nd coming up and the car rally on September 26th. If you join our action list at ohiocitizen.org, or if you go to our website or socials, you'll be able to see all of this. Thank you so much and have a great night.